Hello everyone. Today I thought I'd do a little thing about decks for the store championships, since it's more of a block format set 10 only thing. So these are all budget builds where it's got like maybe one or two SRs, and even then you could cut them for commons or uncommons. The reason I pick Sin is just as a control option for people instead of go tanks. Honestly, it's probably actually easier to make go tanks, and there's no necessary unison. Sin, the issue is with a unison, they're all higher rarities, so the uncommon one is just plain bad. So you get this tough issue of not being able to really complete the deck without going super money. But even then, the core part is what matters. The other reason I pick Sin over Go Tanks is on turn 2 you're getting out your 9 drop. It's a very impactful way to play. It's still already defensive enough with just the blockers. And there's some other cards in this that help it stall out without having a proper negates. But the most aggro of the deck is obviously the Pilaf. The Ginyu is also aggro, but since you have the ability to leave mana up and essentially just use your leader ability to play the top card of your deck for free, you can, starting turn 2 or later, just leave mana open for your counter plays and stuff. So that's why Ginyu's kind of in between, where depending on the matchup it can play against Shenron, it's just going to swarm the board because Shenron's not good at handling swarm. While versus Pilaf, it's going to hold the mana for the counters, and it's going to still make a decent board presence with what it has, just not as spammy as it would, like it would with Shin. Or Sin. I don't know why I said Shin. But we'll go over each of these in sideboards. So let's put these to the side real quick. And I'll also have links to each of these decks in the comment of this video. So you got the Pilaf leader, we have 4, the uncommon Vegeta. Honestly, even with Sin and Vegito, this is probably one of the best ones for the format. You can even do some shenanigans where you swarm on turn 2, awaken, play this, and do 3 swings even on turn 2. A lot of pressure, more than a lot of decks can handle. It's what you want to do against Sin, especially if you're going first, to really pressure them before they can actually get their plays going. So for those Vegetas, so like I said, even if you want to make the money version of the deck, I still think Vegeta's the best option. If you really want to do Sins and make the deck a turn slower, I'd still say side the Vegetas. It's also good against all the random 5Ks people are playing. So that's the other reason why you want to use that. Next we have 4 copies of this rare from the set. It's a Self-Awakener, not that you need it with the amount of swarm you're going to do, but it allows you to also get rid of opponent's battle cards and then ready it, and then swing lead, or double swing at unison. You shouldn't really be going for unisons that often with this deck, but it does give you the option of keeping their unison low. So that's why there's 4 of those. Next, we have 4 copies of the Pilaf. In Constructed, I say only run 3. In this limited format, I would say you want to run 4. The reason you want to run 4 of them is you're probably going to play 2 cycles of these per game, as opposed to standard Constructed, you probably only play 1 cycle to win the game. So you want to make sure there's enough in deck to do 2 cycles worth. Next, we have 4 shoes, same reason. You need to be able to do 2 cycles worth. If you draw too many extra dead ones, you simply put them in your energy. So not much of a problem there. For the Mize, same thing. For Pilafs, decent turn 1 that replaces itself, and you kind of get the choice between the 5, so it's better than just draw in theory. 4 copies of the Mai, same thing, only it doesn't have the unison text. Really, you can't search the unison in this deck anyway because it's Vegito is the 4 specified cost one. For the Bulma super combos, really good with the last 2 cards because essentially you get to play out a 1 drop and then you get to search for another Earthling. So it's kind of like getting 20k combo power for 10k. You also get the draw. 4 copies of Tau. This should actually be 3, but because we made a budget to replace some of the SRs that would be in the deck, we just added in a 4th Tau. Just a consistency thing. You charge extra ones, that simple. You don't have to fear that. 4 copies of the Bardock because it's just a great damage dealer. If they remove, you can play another one next turn. That's the beauty of Pilaf, is just by doing what you're supposed to do, you start playing more bodies for free. And that's the best part about it. 3 copies of the shoe. I'm not a super big fan of it in standard, but in a limited where you do this on turn 2 or turn 1, unless you set up for your turn 3 chain without dedicating any mana, that's pretty useful for letting you advance your board in other ways. So I'll take the -1 to hand size for this, but only 3 copies. 3 copies of the Mecha Pilaf. Honestly, I don't play it at all in standard. Once again, 3 mana is a lot for that. It takes stuff out of your drop, which you do some amount of overwhelming in this deck, so that can become an issue. The other thing is in the Sin matchup, this is very bad to play. You're basically getting a 25k for 3, no triple attack for that turn, and it's going to get popped with the block anyway. So it's a lot of mana for not enough. You want to go wide against Sin. It's a decent extender though, so that's why it's in 3. And I'd say this one, like the Tau, if you're adding SRs to the deck, this is the next thing you cut it down to 2. I'd say in limited, still having 2 in deck as an extender is fine. 2 copies of our Overwhelm target. Honestly, there is the Tournament Pack Trunks that is better than this, but if you don't have the TP packs, the Standing Ground is your next best option. There's also Vegeta that you could technically use to like sack off the Bardocks and draw, but that's 15 versus 20. I like the 20 because it's more that type of combo over, but you could choose either one. But if you're going to choose anything at all, I'd say go with the Tournament Pack Trunk, so for both. Next we have 1 Wolfang Fist. It's not too expensive, and of course it's a negate. And finally 1 of the Yamcha, good against other wide boards. I would say, like I was saying, we have the extra Taos and Pilaf machines. They'd get turned into Wolfang Fist or Yamchas, is your main goal for this deck. If you really wanted to make it more expensive, you'd have Bulmas either side or main as a way to recover against decks that are removing you a lot. For side deck, we'd have 4 of the Pilaf missiles, just as out against the mirror match. 3 copies of the Princess. This is basically, if we're on the draw, we're going to play a more defensive game. 2 of the Son Gokus, basically against Sin, to get that final damage in. You'd rather have 2 of these than the Pilaf machines. Then next, you should probably have 2 of him. I have the other ones. The only issue is that they're in one of the other decks as a side deck card, so I don't have enough copies to show the full side deck of every deck, but 2 of him. And finally, the last 4 cards are going to be, it's actually in one of the other decks in the main deck, and I don't have more than 4 copies, but the Supreme Kai. You don't have to be a black leader to use the auto that gives it the extra 5k, and with the few negates in this format, you're going to win combo wars with this card. Especially if you think you're going to go a long game, you would add this in. Or if you're on the draw as a defensive Pilaf player, you would add this in. So you need less resources to combo out of your opponent. So that's the reason for that. You'll notice there's no side deck other unison option. I personally would say just run the Vegeta in this format. You can get the best bang for your buck with that. So Pilaf's out the way. I actually run Pilaf in standard. It uses a lot of like old school good cards though, not just Pilaf engine. You'll notice there is no Ostrich form in this deck, by the way. Ostrich form is really bad. I don't know why people play it. Maybe they just say, oh, it's a Pilaf card and I'm going to use it. It's not worth playing. So I don't know why people are using it. I know the removal, cool. That's not what this deck does. You can do a lot more with 2 mana than that Ostrich form provides. So yeah, don't waste space on it. Now we'll go over the Ginyu deck. So we picked 4 of the Demigura. So there's a few reasons for this. Number 1, in the late game, it's decent removal against wide boards with its -3. In the early game, you're actually getting above your opponent's unison. You're playing at turn 1. you're plussing it to 2, the next turn it'll be 3, etc. unless they swing at it. But even if they swing at it, you could just take the life and add it to your hand. So it's a way of helping you self-awaken. And then the other thing about it is there's a lot of turn 2 plays you want to make in this deck. So by having a 2-drop Unison, you're interfering with your main line of the deck, which is doing your Ginyu Swarm. So this gives you a turn 1 play option, and I find it to be one of the best options for the budget build and for the non-budget build. The SR Frieza is honestly a little underwhelming because you don't really need the fixing of the top of your deck as much as you think. And the starter deck one, it's actually in the side deck of this, and I'll go over that later. But next we have the Vegeta Super Combo. So you can use it for hand disruption too, not just a super combo. For the Dodoria, if you really need to cut something, cut this down to 3. But I like having it just as a surprise double strike. 4 copies of the Raccoon. Basically every single Ginyu Force member we're going to have 4 copies of. Sorry for the shadow that my hand's casting. And 4 copies of the Birder. 4 copies of the Jace. The Jace is really the kind of turn 2 one you want to get down so that you can manipulate what you're adding to hand and manipulate the top of the deck. And then in a way you can kind of like get one Ginyu to hand like a Birder and put a Raccoon on top. Basically get the Raccoon and chain into stuff. That's the way you normally want to get it. You could also just start Raccoon into stuff. Your choice. Goldo, which is your no mono way of adjusting the top. And you just kind of need him if you want to do Ginyu shenanigans. 4 copies of the starter deck Frieza Ginyu. It's only non-unique, which is relevant for letting you just spam the board with your draw, because what some people are going to do is they're just not going to deal with your board. You're going to be stuck with the same guys on board. So instead we have 4 of these to let you find a way to keep playing. 4 copies of the black card that goes off discarding. You can cut it down to 3 if you want, since there's not a lot of hand destruction in the deck. They also have 0 combo. In the Pilaf matchup you would side these out. And once again the same thing, those Kai of Times is what would come in for these in that matchup. 3 copies of the free play Ginyu. Lets you steal a threat and then lets you go into the next card for free. Lets you go into this card by sacking their card off. Now some people run 2 of these. I run 3 specifically because this can actually be your turn 4 play, and you don't need to play it for free to get the auto. That's going to boost all your Ginyus. So you could just play this as a 20k double striker. That's going to give all your boys plussing. So that's what I like about it. It's kind of like an Anthem effect. For your board of 15Ks, make it harder for your opponent to get through. Or counter it with blocks. And comboing, I should say. 3 copies of the counter plays Arbon. There's turn pack Ginyu that's just straight better. But obviously, if you don't have that, it's Arbon. You can cut it down to 2 once again. 3's in the deck. 1 copy of the Demigra. There is another option that's actually in the side deck. Just one over them, you don't want to go too crazy with it. 1 copy of our counter Frieza, and then the last 3 cards of the deck I actually own 0 copies of. It's only a rare, but somehow I don't own it. It's the Death Ball Frieza rare, Dark Death Ball. It's basically counter play that you can play for free if all your energy is mono green by discarding 2 cards, and it sends their 4-dropper lets being played to the drop area. And then you also get to KO one of their 1-drops or less. So, or 1-drops I should say. So it's very good. It's played at 3 in the main deck. And then for the side deck, we have the 4 starter deck Frieza Unisons. So this is if you wanted to play the longer game. You have this to generate card advantage, where you can just start ditching unnecessary cards. It also has a good removal effect. The only issue is when it loses counters, you can prevent it by critting a life instead of adding it to your hand. The other thing about this is, since you are discarding cards, it's easier to fuel overwhelm, which is what this other card is in the side for. Overwhelm 6 is a lot, but not when you're discarding a card each turn. So that's why he becomes relevant, because you basically play the slower game, add that in his removal. And you already saw he was in the Pilaf side. For the Dodoria, once again, another early game way of responding to things. And just the last card of the deck, 4 Supreme Kais that you saw before. And then with just a 1 of that Dark Death Ball for the 4th copy. So basically, a lot of the side stuff lets you play the late game. It's more control oriented, while the main deck is more swarm oriented. So it's definitely the most like modal deck of all the decks here. So it's probably gonna be favored to win just because of how you can play it. The question is, how often is Pilaf just gonna blindside people? Is gonna decide which deck is actually gonna be the favorite one. Then next we have the Sendek. Like I said, it honestly needs more money. For example, I only have 1 copy of this in the deck because of the price. The uncommon is just terrible. And then 3 more unisons, being the Gotenks, just because it's a finisher in the late game. So that's why it's there, because this deck, it revolves around just the Sin stuff, so it's just another finisher. You'll notice all these decks only have 4 unisons. In standard, I only play up to 5 unisons, because they don't have combo ability. They're basically dead draws. You have to charge them or discard them, and it just can get in the way. So I try not to play more than 5, especially with aggro decks. You're gonna get yourself killed if you have more than 5. In this format, with very few negates, you basically need to win by combo power, and every extra unison you have denies you combo power. So do not play more than 4 in this limited format. And then this deck, main decks, I got crumbs on my stuff. This deck main decks the 4 copies of the Supreme Kais to the sides of them. Since you are the more control-y deck, the more grindy deck, you want to main deck them so that you can stall out. Next, 4 copies of the 9-cost Sin. 4 copies of the Haze. It's going to be a lot of 4 copies. 4 copies of the Crit Goku. It's kind of just a resource denial thing. If you're in a control mirror match, especially the early game, resource denial is helpful. Against aggro, it's probably not the best for you though. 4 copies of the Negative Energy. 4 copies of the 4-drop, a lot of 4-ups. So that's the cool part about this deck. The core engine takes up a lot of the deck, which is nice. The same thing for the Pilaf and the Ginyu. Really, a lot of the cards in this set, it's a 4 of the main cards, which I like. I kind of like this format in terms of how they did the archetypes. 4 copies of the 3-drop. This card can be cut. It's kind of just there because there's so many 1-drops in this deck. It's essentially a draw 1 in this deck. So that's why we have it. We chose the Gohan as super combo. Honestly, either one works. It's just this one has an optional upside to it. So why not play with optional upside? It's also a 1-drop, so it does get hit with the Giru. This card is one of the weaker cards in the deck. It's just there because we can't play SRs. But it's a 30k with Barrier and Deflect, which is relevant. 20k. Barrier and Deflect. There's not a lot of extra cards being played this format without, other than a few negates. So the effect's not going to happen that often, but it's decent. 2 copies of Goku. These cards could easily be cut for your negates and stuff. It's just had to put something in the deck, and I picked yellow cards over black cards because one thing you might notice, a lot of these decks have mono requirements. For example, the Sin, you're going to need a 6 yellow eventually if you get to that late in the game, and the Pilaf needs 3 red in order to do the chain, so you don't want a clutter deck with too much black. So that's why we added these in. It also is a way to get the chain with this. And then 1 copy of the Vegeta. So that's kind of the 2 money cards we had in the deck. For the side deck, we have 4 Poutines, Really, that card could probably get cut if you wanted to. It's pretty cool against, what's it called? Against Pilaf if you could get it out early, because it's going to tap their stuff. 4 copies of the Dragon counterplay, 3 copies of the Bowman. They might be wondering, well, you don't really have the yellow unisons. Well, that's what there's 3 bad Broly's in here for. You add them in when you really need the extra push. You play those instead of playing the Gotenks. And then one of Mira Explosion of Energy. I don't know, I said Miracle Explosion. So you don't really want to overwhelm because of your leader's ability. So this is kind of your black generic help you finish type card. Really, any of them could side this card. It's a decent card. The other side deck card you can look into for a lot of these decks is Time Bullet. It's a generic black decent counterplay that doesn't care about the color of your unisons and stuff. But like I said, you want to watch out how many black cards are in a deck because of those threshold requirements for these decks to function. So you need to be careful. So that's why I say you could think about it, but don't add too many. Maybe 2 in a side deck if you're looking for a negate. So those are the 3 decks. Like I said, Goten's cool, but I think he doesn't do enough in the early game to be considered relevant against these decks that do so much more in the early game. So that's why I said these were the top 3. And realistically, the only one that seems a little crippled by being a budget version is the Sendek, because you lack the unisons. But other than that, honestly, the rest of it's pretty much the core of the deck of a Sendek. Hopefully you guys like this. Like I said, you should, if you're not maining, at least be siding the Kai of Times, because the extra combo power is going to matter a lot in this meta. And look into a few counter plays in the side, like the Pilaf bullets, missiles, even if you're not going to main them just because it's decent. But overall, the best deck in terms of being able to play early and late game is going to be the Ginyu Deck. I personally just prefer the Pilaf deck though, just because I like how it functions compared to the Ginyu Deck. But preference isn't everything. I can't really think about what else I wanted to say. Bro, I should write a script, right? Yeah, look at me not writing scripts. Oh well. You guys have a great day. Best of luck with your store championships. I'll let you know how mine goes. I'm obviously not going to be using a budget version. I have a more competitive version of the Pilaf I'm probably going to play. But this is a good start for people to have fun. Bye, everyone.